need some.
Okay.
All right. Well, then we will go ahead and get started. We know that we want to respect everybody's time, and Carrie probably has dinner to go eat at some point in time. So
Maybe.
maybe in 30 minutes, hopefully, right? So
I mean, we're actually thinking about going to the pool after this because it's
All
hot
right.
today, and walking a block and a half to the pool seems like a good idea.
all right. So with
Okay.
that, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome back to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie. We are so glad that you are here today. And we are really, really excited to have this week's guest speaker. So, Carrie, talk to me a little bit about why you thought Neil was such a great person to have on. Tell us a little bit about Neil, and then we will start asking questions.
Okay, so Neil is a business broker. I met Neil at a conference, I don't know, 5 years ago. And I really liked the way he talked about the business and the way he seemed to understand both the real estate and the financial part of business, I guess, because he has to walk people through the finances when people are buying the businesses. And we just get along. So I think it's important for directors and for owners to know what the process is like if there's ever a change in ownership. So if you're an owner and you want to sell at some point, you need to know what that's going to look like, because the number of people who I've talked to who are like, yeah, I've expensed everything I've done and now I'm ready to sell. And I'm like, yeah, you're going to have to do revised taxes if you want to be able to sell it for what you say you want to be able to sell it for. And also, if you're a director and there's a possibility of an ownership change, or, well, I guess even in the nonprofit sphere, it's technically an ownership change, but it goes from being this nonprofit who's the boss to this nonprofit who's the boss. You don't need to run for the hills just because there's an ownership change. The owners aren't there to change, new owners aren't there to change everything in the first 30 days. And a good new owner will have worked with someone like Neil, and they will help them listen to your ideas as the existing director and stuff like that. So I just thought,
well, stop stealing all of Neil's point. Like, wait, what are you doing? All right.
So that's why I thought we should have him on.
I think that's great. Well, Neil, I am so glad that you're here, and I'm so glad that you support early child care as the industry instead of just kind of, oh, I'm a business broker. And so if you don't know, I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there. Preschoolexchange.com is Neil's business website. And so let's just start with what would you say to a director who wants to expand and buy a center? What would you say to them first? What would be your first?
Yes, well, thank you, Kate and Carrie. So firstly, I do want to talk about the fact that Preschool Exchange, has been built on the foundation that if people transition into good quality school, it is good for the community as well. So like you said, it's not just about a business transfer. It is also healthy people bring healthy habits, and, financially stable directors, owners have a good culture in place as well, which you can see, and that actually percolates to the children as well as the families. So it is a good ecosystem that we have to all work together to. Now, that being said, when it comes to a director or an owner trying to, well, let's talk about a director. The fact that a director is now ready to buy her own business, that's a big step. It's always like you are now sitting on the other side of the table. You were actually working for somebody. You did not have the responsibility of writing that payroll check, writing that rent or a mortgage check. While you were responsible for marketing, maybe while you were responsible for enrollment, making sure the childcare licensing standards are met, and maybe even beyond that, making sure that expectations of parents are met and a good environment is created. Well, now every 15 days, you are going to be writing a big check for that payroll. And every month you are going to be writing a check for that mortgage. And most of all, it is their life savings that they bring into the venture. So it's a big responsibility for them. My guidance to the directors would be, first thing, have your systems, processes in place.
Okay.
So that way, coming into ownership, how you want to guide your center now, right? Second part is financials. So when you are looking at a center, while you are qualifying that particular center, whether it is a viable purchase or not, what are you doing to have your financials in place, right? You cannot just put 3 lines on a personal financial statement and expect a bank to start giving you a loan. You need to have, let's say, 10% down payment to qualify yourself to buy into a building. Or if you, yes, go ahead, Carrie.
So I have a question. So can they be a sole proprietor? Should they be an LLC? When do they decide that in the process?
Firstly, run away from sole proprietorship. Always have an LLC. Yes. So foundationally, talk to your CPA and at least get a good organization structure in place. I always recommend, and most good CPAs will recommend, two corporations or 2 LLCs to be created. If you are going to buy a building, then one should be for the real estate holding company, and then the second should be for your operations. Always have your operations pay a rent to your holding company. And S Corp, C Corp, different organizations, that the CPA can advise. But at least from that, yeah, definitely, I don't like people having a Schedule C, not a sole proprietorship. Always do a corporation. There is liability involved. You have parents coming to the school, you have children coming to the school, so it is always a good idea to have yourself incorporated.
Okay, that is such great feedback, Neil, and I love listening to you explain to them why. It's one thing for us to say it, it's another thing to hear it from somebody who's talking to them about literally becoming a professional. Yes. And I think that's the key here is people buying a building, buying a business, you are now becoming a professional, which sometimes our directors get stuck. They get stuck with that concept.
They're already a professional. It's just taking it to another level. It's taking their financial management professionalism to a whole other level.
Yeah. But we do have a fair amount of directors that still get stuck with even viewing the fact that they really are a high-level professional.
And, many things are out of their comfort zone, right?
That is great. Great point.
Yes. Totally understandable. Looking at, oh my God, I have to now create a P&L statement. It's like, whoa, that is not my forte. But there are some things you have to prepare yourself for. You had a good CPA for yourself, but when you are presenting yourself, you need to make sure that you are ready. And financial readiness is very, very important. One is to create an environment where you are saving yourself up the 10% down payment. So that's one example. If you're going to lease a building, you need to have at least 6 months of operational funding in place as well. So that means your past tax returns should be done properly. Your bank statements, you need to be ready to share all that information to a prospective lender or a landlord.
Okay, that was a great segue. Thank you for teeing that up for me, because now I'm going to ask you, do we want to buy a building, rent a building, or build a building? Like, where do we go here? What's the best place? What are the pros and cons?
So, okay, so so I'm going to divide it into two parts, right? Starting from scratch, which is a vacant building, land leasing, buying, building your own building. Or the second aspect of that is actually buying an existing running business.
Oh, okay.
Right. Okay. So first, let's talk about leasing versus buying. The biggest difference between leasing versus buying is the down payment requirements and the amount of money that you have to bring to the table. If you're buying a building, let's say it's worth $1 million, you have to put at least 10% down, which is $100,000. If you are leasing a building or renting a building, and it is, let's say, 5,000 square feet, well, you can get away with a much lesser amount of initial capital, which could be 1 month's rent as deposit, and maybe 2-3 months of operating expenses. You are looking at maybe $30,000 to $40,000. So your entry point drives whether you want to lease or to buy a building, and the commitment. Building from scratch, I would leave it to once you have a center in place, or you are really looking at an area where there is nothing available. But that is very capital intensive, because you are trying to buy land and then you are waiting for 1.5 years to get construction. So I would, for first time directors, I would say use that as your last option. Right?
So Neil, I'm just going to bring, we've all heard horror stories, and anybody who's listened to us for the last couple of years knows that Carrie and I have some. Carrie's got more than I do related to building ownership. And so I want to talk a little bit about we've seen a lot of directors come through and they get sold a business or a lease in a space, but that business went out of business, right? Like, so it's not buying an existing program, but it's somebody going, oh, this used to be a child care center. This would be great for you. What would be some things that you might tell them to make sure to ask or look for before just presuming that because it was a child care center, it's a good building?
Yeah, because it meets the zoning requirements. It's got the parking. It's got a fenced in yard.
It might, because that can always be changed from when
Yes,
it
but
was.
that's what they're usually told.
Yeah.
Is that it meets zoning because it's already been one. So what should they be looking at?
Yeah. So first thing is demographics. So, okay, demographics is number one thing, right? And when I talk about demographics, I mean, now we are talking about childcare demographics. As a director, what is your style of your program? And does that area support your style of program? And let me explain what I mean. Are you planning to do a Christian faith-based center? Or are you doing a Montessori program? Are you doing a Spanish bilingual program? Will that area support what you are trying to do? Right?
So are you saying we shouldn't have a Spanish bilingual program in Little China?
Maybe, maybe not. I mean, but that is the research that somebody needs to do to see that, okay, well, maybe you can do a Spanish program, but you might have to add a Mandarin program as well. And maybe a Spanish program may not work. Well, and then the second part is the income level of that area. So if you're going to be doing a very high end, $1,500, $1,800 per month, that is your vision, and you are going into a shopping center, which used to be a childcare, but they were 80% subsidy program, then that may not be a good fit. But if you are in that market where you are okay with a subsidy program and that area supports it, then it is a perfect fit for you. From a history perspective, my experience is that it does not really bother. When I have really strong directors, particularly, and operators, I mean, their calling just tells them whether this location will work for them or not. So while they are being sold, I think you need to just look at your internal, and I talk about gut feel. If you walk a building and your gut feel says yes, do it. If it says no, just walk away. Don't worry about what somebody's telling you.
Oh, I love the gut. Guts are great things. If only everybody listened to them more often. Uh, so one thing that I think would be a really interesting thing to answer or look for those who are trying to figure out what does Neil do? Why are we listening to Neil? Is what does a business broker actually do? So what do you do, and why should they use you versus their buddy who's a realtor?
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. So all we do is childcare, right? So we know the ratios. We can walk into a building and we can almost tell that these 2 classrooms cannot be used as infant programs because they don't have an exit door going outside. So from a fire inspection perspective, from a liability perspective, we can call out things that a normal real estate brokers just cannot, A childcare is a living and a breathing entity. So believe me, I'm working on transaction where an owner is actually sending me all the parent leads right now, which I'm transferring it to the buyer. So confidentiality is number 1 priority as well. You have to protect the school. If the parents and the teachers are told beforehand without a good transition plan in place, it can actually cause a lot of heartache for the existing owner and for the buyer as well. Then there is a due diligence process. So we help people walk through the whole due diligence process as well. When it comes to contracts, we know what an asset purchase agreement should look like. There is a transition, there is a non-compete. So it's preparing those sellers and the buyers for a good, smooth transition. And of course, then we have the whole financing piece in place. So we already know what banks like, what kind of transactions, if it is a cash flowing school, if it is not a cash flowing school. So all the nuances that come with buying and selling schools, we have gone through that process more than 150 times.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. I mean, I think, I've been with Carrie, and Carrie's been through 3 buys or 2 buys and a takeover. I don't know what that
Yeah, various things.
And a sale. I'm like, I don't know. There were some buys, there were some sells,
there's a lot of everything. So do you prefer to represent the sellers or the buyers, Neil?
Good question, Carrie. Yes, so almost 99% of the time we represent the sellers. Sellers need more protection than typically the buyers who are coming in. Childcare industry has always almost been a seller's market. This is not an office building market or a retail or a housing where there are so many options. Out of about 8,000 centers in Texas, maybe less than 1% gets sold every year. So we are always trying to work with the sellers and find a good fit for the buyers to come in. So it is normally always the sellers.
Okay, so should the buyers have a broker? Should there be somebody that the buyers are working with that have their best interest or that can help educate them? I mean, I know that when you're buying a house, they often tell you don't necessarily want to have the agent handle both sides.
Yes.
Do you have some? Does it work the same way with buying a childcare center?
Not really, right? So buying a childcare center is very different. So, well, now doing this for almost 15 years, I have had instances where a residential real estate agent just came up to us and said, hey, we have a buyer. Okay. Next thing, you find out that they are actually walking outside the building with their buyer and one more of their office person. And the seller calls us and says, Neil, I have 3 people outside the building walking. What are they doing? So many brokers don't understand confidentiality. they don't understand the childcare licensing process. They don't understand. So it's very hard for just another broker to start thinking, oh, we can help a buyer buy a childcare center. So what we do is we do have a program when we work with buyers, but it is more on a consultation side.
Okay.
Representing buyers is just different. It is, you typically won't see in any business brokerage industry. So whether it is a dental practice, whether it is a childcare industry, this is more like a company sale rather than just buying a piece of property. So whenever we have a vacant building, yeah, we will always entertain other brokers. We will help them get through the process as well. But when it is a childcare center, we are very, very protective. And we have a process of qualifying the buyers as well, which typically other brokers don't do. We will ask some hard questions. Like I got a call today saying, hey, we want to put an offer on this school. I'm like, okay, what are you planning to do with the school? Why is this school a good fit for you? So we ask those hard questions, not to diminish anybody, but to make sure that, it will be a smooth sale and it will be a good fit for both of them.
Oh, I can only imagine how much better that makes a buyer feel, as well as the seller, because the seller's invested in this business and, they would like to make sure it's successful because it's
a life.
Still their name, even though they might be selling it, right? People are still going to associate them with that business.
Kate, I met an owner today who actually sanded the flooring in their school when they opened it. Their mark is on every single wall, every single child that has gone through it. It is emotional. It is not just, oh, I'm going to lock it up and then I'm going to turn off my utilities,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm watching Carrie's face, so I'm thinking there's a little bit of an agreement there. Her first center.
Yeah.
Definitely knocked out a few walls.
I did all the remodel of the first center, and I know the woman who owns it now, and she's probably pretty close to needing your services, Neil. But she'll need some help to prep her books and everything to be ready.
No, and that is a part of what we do. We call it recasting of financials as well. So we do the financial modeling. We help them do evaluation, which is actually free, for them. And then I have had relationship with owners who we have planned out like a 3-year transition plan or a 5-year transition plan, so we can look at their books and tell them, okay, if we are going to look at, let's say, instead of $1 million today, I think it can be worth 1.4 million, but here are the 5 steps you need to do. And it will take you, let's say, 2 years to get there. Let's have a plan together.
Absolutely. So, I think if you're looking to buy a school and you don't know somebody who's selling, if you're already working in the business and you're buying the business that you're working in, it's a little different. But if you're doing anything else, please work with a business broker and work with a lawyer to make sure that you get all your I's dotted and your T's crossed.
Very true.
And Neil is the one I would recommend if you're in Texas. If you're somewhere else, I don't know who to recommend you to. But I think Neil is very detail oriented, and he supports our industry and trains in the industry. And I think he's great.
Thank you. Yes. So we'll see you all at actually the conferences, right? We work together. We love.
And you're going to a conference later this week, aren't you?
AELL, yes, in Nashville. So I will be there actually day after tomorrow.
So do you do some? Do you
by
do
the time this airs, you will have already come back.
Yeah.
And then you've got the TAEYC conference and the the TLCCA conference in the fall,
yes.
right?
So we will be at Kalahari. I've already submitted my proposal to speak, as well as a booth. So we are all set. So for Texas AEYC, yes, at Kalahari, I think it is in September.
Kalahari's November, but yes.
November, yes, November 2023, and TLCCA, yes, very soon in TLCCA.
Yep.
Well, Neil, we are so glad that you joined us, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. If you guys have any questions or you want to know more, feel free to reach out to Carrie and I at either Carrie@texasdirector.org or Kate@texasdirector.org. Neil's contact information will be in the show notes, and we really hope that you all will come out and join us. You'll be able to find Neil with us at TLCCA and some other guest speakers that you've heard over the course of the last year. So we're excited to have everybody kind of together.
Thank you.
Okay. Then we'll stop the recording.